Nearly 66 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II is the longest reigning monarch in British history and has been a constant and calming force amidst the fast-paced changes her country has faced, making it even more inconceivable to think about what happens when she dies. Born in 1926, she was expected to live a relatively normal life, well, normal at least by royal standards, as third in line to the throne, spending most of her early years out of the public eye. Everything changed in 1936, when her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated the throne in order to marry his true love, Wallis Simpson. You see, back then, marrying a divorcee, not to mention a two-time divorcee, was a huge faux pas to the Church of England. And just like that, Princess Elizabeth's father, King George VI, ascended to the throne, making her the next in line. And by 1952, following his death, her time arrived, and the rest is history. When the Queen ascended to the throne in 1952, she was a head of state in 7 countries. The size of the Commonwealth has since expanded to 53 countries, comprising nearly 1/3 of the world's population, and still includes 16 countries where the monarch is officially the head of state. This brings us to Operation London Bridge, the plan that no one wants to talk about, the plan for what happens when the Queen dies. No matter how secretive Buckingham Palace may be about the plans that surround her death, everyone knows exactly what to do, and the plans, which were uncovered by The Guardian, are complex, intricate, and timed out to the exact minute. Phase 1, D-Day. According to The Guardian, on the day the Queen dies, Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary, will be the first official to convey the news, setting Operation London Bridge into full gear. And at the exact moment in which she passes, Prince Charles will become king, and Camilla will become queen-ish. We'll explain that a bit later. On a secure line, Young will directly inform the British Prime Minister that London Bridge is down, and the news of her death will be distributed to various heads of state before it is disclosed to the general public. Once the Prime Minister is alerted, the Foreign Office's Global Response Center will alert the 15 governments where the Queen is still considered the head of state. From there, the 37 nations where she still serves as a political figurehead will also be informed. After this, the announcement of her death will be shared with both the UK's Press Association and the rest of the media outlets across the globe. Outside the palace, the news crews will be able to assemble in a predetermined area next to the Canada Gate. The same message will appear on the palace's website on a dark background. All the flags at the palace will be lowered and bells will toll. Both houses of Parliament are expected to gather within hours of her death. And on the evening of his mother's death, Charles will make his first address to the public as king. Now, all of this is assuming that she dies in London. If that's not the case, here's how things will play out. Scenario 1. If the Queen dies abroad, the royal equivalent of Air Force One will fly a coffin to the location of her death, accompanied by the royal undertakers, and return the Queen's body to London. Scenario 2. If the Queen dies at her Sandringham estate in Norfolk, her body will return to London by car a few days after she passes. Scenario 3. The most intricate scenario of all is if the Queen passes while at the Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where she spends 3 months a year. Scottish rituals will play out before her body returns to London. Phase 2, D-Day +1. Flags will be raised the morning after her death, and at 11 a.m., Charles, the eldest male descendant of Queen Elizabeth, will be proclaimed king. At this point, Charles has waited longer than anyone else in history to assume the throne. Phase 3, D+1 through 12. Following the first 24 hours after her death, Great Britain will enter a 12-day mourning period, culminating with the Queen's funeral. King Charles will tour the country, stopping in Edinburgh, Belfast, and Cardiff, to appear at services to honour his mother. During this time, he will also meet with various elected leaders. D+1. Westminster Hall will be closed for cleaning. Elaborate and lavish funeral preparations will begin. D+4. The coffin will be moved to Westminster Hall during a procession that is expected to take place throughout London. When the coffin arrives, Big Ben will chime. Her body will then lie in state for 4 days. The Queen's orb, scepter, and the imperial crown will be placed on her coffin, and visitors will be allowed to pay their respects for 23 hours a day. D+9. In the early hours of the morning, the jewels will be cleaned before the funeral begins. Daily life will come to a halt in London. Businesses and stores will be closed. Big Ben will toll at 9 a.m. on the dot, and the bell's hammer will be covered with leather so that the bell rings in muffled tones throughout the remainder of the day. D+12. Her coffin will then be moved into Westminster Abbey, and the funeral will begin by 11 a.m. While the media will be allowed to film the services, the faces of the royals will not be shown during prayers. After the funeral, the same carriage that carried her father will return her body to her final resting place at Windsor Castle. It's an understatement to say the Queen's death will mean huge changes for the House of Windsor. As previously mentioned, Prince Charles will become king. So what happens to Camilla? Most royal experts believe that the Queen's death will technically make Camilla the Queen Consort, but any speculation about her title is just that. King Charles will ultimately make that official decision. The Queen's death will move Charles's eldest son, Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, up in the line of succession to heir apparent. After that, William's 3 children will fill the line in their birth order. This includes his daughter. Thanks to a 2011 vote by the British Commonwealth, Princess Charlotte will be second in line, following her big brother George. So what does this mean for Prince Harry, Charles's youngest? Back in 2013, before the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge had children, Prince Harry was 3rd in line to the throne. Now, Prince Harry is 6th, followed by any children he and Meghan